Yo, good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Brian Forbes, and I want to welcome you all to the Black Factor, where the truth doesn't care about your feelings, and the facts are what make the difference. Because around here, we provide facts. I'm only going to do facts. I only do facts. I don't do nothing else. Only facts. You don't like facts, that's the wrong place, y'all. The Black Factor is not for you. So I want to make sure that you all don't forget to like, subscribe. Don't forget to share. Share the live. You can join me on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. So y'all don't forget. Look, my YouTube people, don't forget, y'all. Hit that doggone, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You know, that helps me out, y'all. It helps me out a lot. And I appreciate it when you do. Sheila White is in the building. Thank you, Sheila. I appreciate you for coming through. And I want to welcome my Oh So Smooth radio family. This is, of course, the Wednesday show of the Black Factor, where we simulcast on Oh So Smooth radio. And anyone who doesn't have that Oh So Smooth app, you need to add that to your cellular device so that you can listen in on the show, even if you can't watch us. Because there's always going to be some good information coming through here. That you can believe. I got Riri in the building. Hey, Riri, all the way from Houston, Texas. Over here kicking it with us on the Black Factor. All right, so let me also give a shout out to my main man, Stretch Alex over there at Swagger and Lace, the comfort, the Steppers Comfort Zone. For those of you who are not familiar with the Stepper community, just so you know. Anyway, y'all, today's show, we're going to talk about generational wealth. We're going to talk about property and some of the unfortunate demise that has come to some of our people historically, and why it's so important for us to own property and what that actually means in regard to generational wealth and the ability to pass that down to our young ones, our descendants. All right, so let's get this. So, y'all, over the recent weeks of doing the show, I've specifically been discussing things that have happened historically, where people have lost properties. They have lost the ability to pass those properties along to the ancestors because of basically it's theft. I've thought about trying to figure out what would be a good term for what's happened to us historically in regard to that type of thing, but it's very difficult to call it anything except what it is, which is theft. Theft by other means, using the law and other things to benefit, which, look, y'all, there's so much stuff that's happened historically that it's just about impossible for us to cover everything that has gone on in our communities and the things that we as black people have suffered. So there's no way for us to sum it all up, and especially not on one show in an hour. And that's why you kind of, when you watch these shows on the Black Factor, you kind of have to go back through some of the shows and read watch the content, listen to the content, and you kind of begin to put the puzzle together to give you certain clarity about, the things that have taken place. And even when we do this, as much information as I try to provide, I still never really scratch the surface of the entire equation, the factors, the black factors, the factors that have put us where we are today, and why generational wealth is something that is reserved for others for the most part. Now, I'm not saying that we don't, to some degree, have some generational wealth in our communities, but the problem is that it is not widespread enough, and it is not something that is as common as it should be, especially in comparison, which I never like to do, but in this case we have no choice because we're talking about a wealth gap between white society and black society, and that gap is very large, and it has been since the freedom, or should I say the emancipation of black people in 1863. The importance of property ownership, the importance of household wealth has become abundantly clear, especially during this pandemic, because a lot of people have suffered through this thing. A lot of people have had difficulties and are working to try and make ends meet. Now, fortunately, the government has stepped in and, assisted a lot of people. But the wealth is the difference between what families own, just as an example, what they have in their savings account, their banking account, checking account, retirement, saving, houses, cars, what you owe on your credit cards. You have that income to debt ratio, which, I mean, let's face it, we all know the credit game is exactly that. It's a game. It's a weird game. You do one wrong thing and they ding your credit for 50 points. You do all the right things and it takes you a year to get those 50 points back. And it's the most asinine system that they could ever come up with. But that's the game. That's part of the game. And, when we know the rules to the game, it makes it easier to play the game. But crazy thing is, when we figure the rules out, they always manage to change them. They change it up so that you don't, you behind in steps. So with your debt and the mortgages, but wealth, it provides families with the ability to invest. Now, fortunately, because of things like social media and because of all of the new apps and different things like that, people are able to invest in ways that in the past would have almost been impossible. I mean, y'all think about it. Now you can basically have a few dollars if you're involved with one of these apps. You can invest in Bitcoin, you can invest in stocks, and you don't have to have a lot of money. That is something that has come to the forefront and I'm glad that it has, because it gives people, those who are willing or those who are knowledgeable or have the information, are capable of investing just a little bit. Because even when coin craze, the cryptocurrencies. I mean, I've seen people make at least a couple of $1,000s, here and there off of it, just playing around. So the fact is, we have more access now. And the reason for that has nothing to do with, say, America, for example, because black people have systemically been held back on many levels. Now, there are those who like to argue that fact, but I'm here for that smoke. I would love to hear those arguments, but I know better and I can prove factually the difference. But since we have had the opportunity to make these types of investments now, it has more to do with the global expansion of social media and the internet and things like that make these things available. Because if it were up to America, if it were up to the so-called greatest country in the world, these things wouldn't be as readily still available. A lot of this stuff is based in other countries. Let's just face it and deal with it for what it is. They don't care if you purple, green, blue, or red. They're going to, take your money and allow you the opportunity to make money in the process, which is that's all we've ever asked for. I mean, let's keep it 100. Black people have never asked for handouts. That was something that was provided to create a crutch for black folks in the community. And the fact is, like James Brown said, I don't want nothing. Just open up the door and I'll get it myself. I don't need nobody to give me nothing. Open up the door and I'll get it myself. But now we've had to kick doors open rather than have them open for us. That is the reality of black life in America. Despite those who sit in their armchair with their privilege and will have us, or attempt to have us, to believe that that's not true, because all opportunities are equal, which we know is a fantastic lie. And the thing, the blanket that comforts them and makes them all cozy at night and makes them sleep well, just because they say it, they think that it's true. But over here, where we talk about facts, the truth has no use for your feelings. So we're going to deal strictly with the facts. Now, the fact is, we have less opportunities to seek the wealth that is available, or supposedly a wealth that's available here in America. But having access to income, or a more than just an average income, allows us to be able to buy properties and participate in the democratic process. Now, a lot of people don't realize that having the ability to participate in the democratic process because of your income allows you even more freedoms. But again, there are those within the democratic system who would rather see you not have access to those things, so they continue to work against you, just like we have currently going on in our government, where there is a particular party who refuses to allow people to vote freely. They are going to do everything in their power to keep that from happening. But wealth in America is synonymous with ownership. It's always been that way since the beginning of this country. It's always been about what people are able to own. Any economist will tell you that most people's wealth and the ability to transfer wealth to the next generation is mostly in real estate and real property. I mean, you know, I don't know if any of y'all have ever seen this guy. He goes around asking people, I think he was on TikTok or one of those, and he goes around and he asks people, what do they do for a living? If he saw them driving like, you know, a $200,000 or $300,000 car, what do you do for a living? Most of the time, those people tell you that they're either into real estate or finance, one or the other. And of course, we know both of those go hand in hand. So that it goes without saying. Sheila White says, we have a lot of poverty pimps. I'm learning that wealth is a mindset. And it's obtainable. Absolutely. I agree. But let's keep in mind, Sheila, that we are also dealing with a society that has gone over and beyond the call of duty in attempting to make black people feel that they are inferior and not qualified, and that they don't believe that it is obtainable. And don't get me wrong, I don't like making blanket statements, that's not a blanket statement. But when we look at the overall, the way black people view themselves or are viewed throughout society, based on the way the media has always manipulated the image of black people, because we've never had control of our own image. Those things go hand in hand, and that is part of the governmental restrictions that have been placed on black people. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But wealth itself is not just a question of financial savings. You know, it has a lot to do with political influence and other things that allow us to have the security to be successful, or to feel that we are even capable of being successful. You know, a lot of people, the funny thing about this is that, you know, a lot of people, if you grow up in the right environment, like you said, Sheila's attitude, if you grow up in the right environment, number one, how many people do we know, or have we heard the story, or even for ourselves, how many times have we heard people say, we was poor and I didn't even know we was poor? Well, because the people raising you, or have raised them, made it clear that you're okay with what's here and you're going to be all right. And when you learn that growing up, you don't realize that the deck is stacked against you. So therefore you work diligently toward success. You don't let those obstacles stand in front of you and you say, oh, I ain't gonna be able to make it. Things are not gonna go my way because I'm black. You know, that was something that you would hear a lot in past decades, where, you know, well, you know, I'm black, I ain't gonna be able to, you know, do this or that. And that's just, I mean, it has ring of truth to it, but we are moving into better times. That's the best thing I can say about that. I want to talk about the incarceration and over policing of our neighborhoods that contributes to the wealth gap that takes place in this country. Because let's be honest, black people are no more violent than white people. But because of the media and because of the way things are depicted and the narrative that is constantly promoted through the news and other areas, we're constantly led to believe that black people are the poster child for all things negative and all things criminal. And we just know that that's not true. If you go and you look at the Department of Justice statistics, you will see clearly that white people, in fact, have a higher murder rate than black people. But then you, unfortunately, because of those images that are presented, you literally have black people walking around saying things like Black lives matter to black people, black lives don't matter to black people. See, these are talking points presented by those who would have you hate yourself. And they would have you to believe that these things don't happen in their communities when they absolutely happen in their communities, and they happen all the time at some of the same rates they happen in our communities, but they don't make the news. And so therefore, suddenly it's our problem. It's all we're the poster child for all things criminal. And all of a sudden, oh, we need more police. Now there's more police, but they're not in their neighborhoods, but they put them in our neighborhoods. So the minute they put them in our neighborhoods, guess what? Now all of a sudden you have a bunch of people that are being arrested for stupid stuff, nonviolent crimes and other things that they shouldn't be locked away forever for. I'm not against the criminal justice system. My problem with the criminal justice system is that it's not a justice system. It's a legal system. And in fact, it is not equally applied. And for that fact alone, we then suffer economically down the road. Lots of men who should never have been in jail in the very first place are not able to make a living because of a criminal record that was put on them at a very early age as a child. But of course, in the criminal system that we have, black men are generally seen as they're seen as adult males, not as children. But when you see a white child get into trouble, suddenly he's just a kid. He made a mistake. He'll be we'll fix it. Not with a black kid though. Black kid gets tried as an adult and off he goes. This is the system we live under. So, and then also, let's not forget the fact that when we talk about the prison industrial complex, and this is one of the things that I've gone over before and I'll continue to go over because I want to drill this into everyone's head clearly, that when a person is incarcerated, most of the penal facilities across this nation are placed into very rural areas. None of this is by accident. They're placed into very conservative areas where when they are housing an individual in particular areas. And I'm going to tell you a funny thing about this. I don't know how many of us know people that are in the penitentiary, but I've known a few. And generally, the individual in the penitentiary never stays at one facility. They tend to move people around, especially if they're going to be there for a long time. This is strategic. They move bodies to these different facilities for the purpose of the census. When the census does the numbers, the people that are counted within those penal systems or those penal facilities in whatever part of the country they're in, they are counted as residents of that state, residents of that county, residents of that city, because that is where they reside currently, which then bolsters the numbers and allows representatives to be placed in those districts that will affect how many people are in the Congress from those areas or the Senate from those areas. See, none of this is by accident. They don't just willy-nilly stick a prison somewhere. They put them where they need them. And then they fill them with black folks. And then, of course, if you can't make a living, once you touch back down on the earth and you get back to the world and you can't make a living, of course you don't have any generational wealth to distribute or to think about distributing as time moves forward. So this is yet another struggle, which creates even more problems. So it helps to increase that wealth gap. Other ways, needless to say, black people almost automatically, depending on profession, because, I went to a vocational high school, and a lot of people came out of that school who have made very good livings from the trades that they learn. See, we've been pushing college for so long. The trades have suffered. And as the trades begin to suffer, there's less labor, more or less laborers and people who can make a living doing things other than having a degree. You can't eat a degree. Okay. Now I am 100% for education. Trust and believe all my children have theirs, but they also have skills of things they can put their hands on if that degree tends to, not work, which I mean, that I ain't gonna say that ain't gonna happen, but a lot of people get degrees and they get them just to have them and they don't really apply to anything and they're still looking for work. Fact is, there are people out here in this society who could use the skills of a good plumber, a good electrician, a good carpenter. My profession from high school, what I learned in high school, was automotive body and fender, a trade that literally has fed my family. It fed my family for a very long time. It is just one of the things that I am capable of. I have a lot of skills and a lot of trades under my belt. However, when you begin to think about where we are currently and people's inability to be skilled laborers, we are in trouble. Sheila White asked CVS Simeon. I went to CVS, Sheila, and that was one of the largest schools with the most vocational programs available, which now it has fallen by the wayside. We had everything in there, literally print shop, sheet metal shop, and these are guys who make the ductwork that go into your homes for air conditioning. We had mechanic shops. We had 3 mechanic shops. We had body shop. We had sewing. We had a machine shop, welding. We had electricity. We had electronics. We had plastics. We had commercial arts. We had, man, listen, the list is so long of the vocations that came out of those schools, and we don't have them anymore. And like many other things, they've been stripped like other resources from our communities, which then again places us in a position for the wealth gap to be increased even further. So I said all of that to say that sometimes, black workers tend to face labor market discrimination. That's yet another way where the wealth gap is widened. Opportunities to contribute and benefit from innovations and advancements in technology, and thus building wealth in a high-value added industries and occupations, are also limited for African-American innovators and entrepreneurs, as federal government research funding regularly excludes them. Now, I said that to say this. There are people, there was a woman several years ago, and her name slips my mind, but she literally had come up with what has been said was a cure for cancer. She, like many other people who have come up with a cure for cancer, got swept under the rug. She was not able to get the government research funding to further her study. Now, why is this? See, this is yet another situation that puts entrepreneurial black people or black people with innovations on the back burner, because like home ownership, those funds are often not made available to people in our positions, and they will find a reason why not to give it to you. And then we also have, we talked about the investment. The financial system does not work well in regard to black people being able to invest in opportunities and deal with credit, for example. I mean, let's keep it 100. We got a little thing in the black community called the black tax. So if you are one of those individuals who, you work on your credit, you keep your credit strong, you're doing what you got to do, but at the end of the day, and I can tell you from my own personal experience as a business owner, I literally have had money in the bank, regular multi-thousand deposits on a weekly basis going into an account. And I didn't want to use this bank anyway, but I was kind of pushed into it by the vendor that I was dealing with because that was the bank that they chose to deal with. But the fact is, they had the money there. And I applied for a loan. And guess what? Do I need to say any more? Denied. Why? My credit was strong. The money is in the bank, but I got denied anyway. This is what happens to a lot of black people. Black people have a hard time getting startup money for businesses, which is also one of the reasons why one of my, I want to write a book about this. I think I'm going to actually do it. I want to write a book that explains exactly how to start a business with no money, like literally. Now I say no money. I don't mean literally just like, well, I do, because I've done it, and I've done it a few times, and the success of it has more to do with your willingness to put in than it does anything else. You know, your willingness to do the work. Some people don't want to work as hard as others. And the fact of the matter is this right here. And I raise my kids on this philosophy. Successful people are the ones that are willing to do what others won't. Because there are people who won't get up every day and they won't do the things that need to be done and wonder why success eludes them. We have things in our communities like, payday loans, currency exchanges, because why? Black folks, and I don't think it's as bad as it used to be, but I can remember a time where you had to jump through hoops to get a bank account. And things are just in place that help to keep keep people, in a bad position. I mean, think about it. You have right now, and being from Chicago, I can tell you straight up, your insurance on your vehicle and your home is based on a zip code. Now, Chicago being as segregated as it is, we all know who lives in certain zip codes. And guess what? The rates are always higher. That's called a black tax. See? That's just one more of those things that we have to deal with. Yet we're told everything is equal. Well, we know that's not true. Then you have right now, and I was hoping to have one of my real estate people on today, but we had everybody was kind of tied up. But the fact is, in the housing market, we still deal with levels of discrimination. We still deal with people steering people out of certain neighborhoods because they don't want them to buy there. We deal with the banks who don't want to commit to loans in certain neighborhoods because they don't want black folks there. Yes, this stuff still goes on. They're going to tell you it doesn't go on, and they'll find every other reason to say that, oh, no, we're not doing it. But they are. It's called redlining. That's a government-sponsored program that began after World War II. Now, we've talked about that extensively on the show, but that's just one more of those things that plays into the fact. I mean, think about it. You buy a home in a certain neighborhood, depending on where it is and what the populace of that neighborhood is in regard to ethnicity, you'll pay the same money everybody else is paying for a property, but it will be devalued because you own it. They'll find a way to devalue it so that your investment never really sees a return. They say real estate doesn't decrease. That's a lie. Ask me how I know. So, I've seen a lot of stuff. It's crazy, but the persistent black-white wealth gap is not an accident. It's the result of centuries of federal and state policies that have systematically facilitated the deprivation of black Americans. From the brutal exploitation of Africans during slavery to systematic oppression in the Jim Crow South and today's institutionalized racism. Dirty hands holding back access to equal education, health care, jobs, housing, and criminal justice. Government policy has created or maintained hurdles for African Americans who attempt to build, maintain, or pass on wealth. That's a fact. Now, again, I'm here for that smoke. Because you got people who don't believe these things. Of course, they're not going to do the homework, but they'll tell you, oh, that's not true. Well, I'm telling you that it is, and I can prove it. It's kind of like the government putting sanctions on a group of people. You know how they got sanctions on Cuba right now? How they want to, treat those people? It's kind of the same thing, except they're doing it right here in America. We have sanctions on us. We have sanctions in our neighborhoods See, it's one thing to be able to get out the neighborhood, you know, and kind of blend in with the rest of society. But when you're stuck in particular areas, those are areas that they intend to keep in a bad situation. Chris Cheney says, we believe the further we are away from our community, the more successful we are. We damage ourselves. I agree with that. We own the bank, the insurance company, the land, the business. We determine the outcome. Chris, I absolutely 100% agree with you. I have a theory, and you know, some people agree and some people don't. But one of the mistakes that we as a society, as a society of our ethnic society, one of the mistakes that we made was, I believe that Dr. King had great intentions, but the fact is, I think that there was a bit of naivete in his foresight of the outcome. But I also believe, in his defense, that he was working toward a goal, and if he could get to that goal, the one beyond that will probably be foreseeable. However, because of his untimely demise, instead of us picking up the ball of and attempting to get the equality that we were seeking, we got some semblance of it, but it was a paper tiger. It was fake. And the fact is, we let go of what we had in our own communities that were building, and we accepted the fact that since we could go and get stuff from other places, we then no longer supported our own, and that hurt us tremendously. So I agree with you 100%. And in fact, later on in this thing here, I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. You know, we have witnessed in our lifetimes and in history that a group of people has maintained a power structure that will maintain their wealth and destroyed many other people and many other situations in the process. Because I've yet to see any black person, any black group, any black anything hang, drag, kill anybody white as a recreational sport in a carnival-like atmosphere. So the question becomes, who are the real savages? The thing is, unfortunately, so many of us want to forget the past, and so many of them want us to forget the past so that we can pretend like everything is even. See, the reason we have to know our history is because we can't possibly know where we are. And we definitely don't know where we're going, because we don't even understand that the directions that we're headed in, we've been pointed in those directions, and for a reason. See, you don't even know that the direction you've been pointed in is the wrong way. You're not supposed to be even going that way, but you've been led to believe that that's the direction you're supposed to go in. And we're steady going. Facts. Until the end of slavery, or to the end of legal slavery in the U.S., enslaved people were considered valuable assets and a form of wealth. In the South, entrepreneurs and slave owners took loans out against the collateral value of their property in the form of people to fund new businesses. In other words, you were the collateral. We were the property. We were the generational wealth that could be handed down. How many movies have you seen in slavery where they literally, the father dies, the master dies, and he hands down his plantation to his sons or his children and his wife or whoever? That was a passing along of generational wealth in the form of human beings. And you think that after 150 years, we would have some level of equality? Nah, not yet. The U.S. government has a long history of facilitating wealth for white Americans. From at least the Land Act of 1785, Congress sought to transfer wealth to citizens on terms that were quite favorable. In some instances, land could be attained by the luck of the draw, but only if you were a white man. Black households continue to face housing market discrimination, which makes it harder for them to own a home in the first place, and their houses appreciate less in value than those of white households. See, so even when you purchase these properties, you still have to be concerned about the value going to be placed on them by a system that is operated by those interested in wealth. Now, going back into history, the 1866 Homestead Act sought to include blacks specifically in the transfer of public lands to private farmers. Discrimination and poor implementation doomed the policy. It's kind of like that whole 40 acres and a mule lie. They shot that down. Black politicians during Reconstruction attempted to use tax policy to force land on the market, but this was met with violent resistance. See, that's always the go-to when they can't talk you out of your stuff, when they can't convince you that you're not good enough, when they can't make you comply with what it is that they have going on, then they become violent. They're going to take it. This is where we're headed. By 1915, black property owners in the South had less than 1/10 of the wealth of white landowners. You hear that? 1915, 1/10 of white landowners. This trend remained stable for the next 50 years. In 1965, 100 years after emancipation, blacks were more than 10% of the population, but held less than 2% of the wealth in the U.S. Now, y'all hear that? 100 years and still less than 2% of the wealth of whites. Less than 0.1% of the wealth in stocks. Wealth had remained fundamentally unchanged and structurally out of reach of the vast majority of black folks. And let me let y'all in on another secret. Those numbers are damn near still the same today. You understand what that means? That means that economically speaking, black people have not advanced any in over 150 years. Now, these land acts, right? So you ended up having the black town idea. It was an idea of, people starting black towns. It reached its peak 50 years after the Civil War. In the late 1800s, the early 1900s, many black towns were established across America, and Oklahoma still to this day has quite a few. I started this thing out because what I wanted to find out was how many black towns were started during the Reconstruction period or right after, and that still exist today. Well, there actually are some. Aside from the many destroyed towns, such as Oscarville, Georgia, which is now Lake Lanier. We did that story a few weeks ago. If you all are interested, go back and find the Lake Lanier story. You can catch it on YouTube or my Facebook page, where we talk about how Lake Lanier, how Oscarville, Georgia became Lake Lanier. Cowalija, Benson, Alabama, a predominantly black town where the first black-owned railroad was started by William E. Benson, and the black school, Cowalija Academic and Industrial Institute, which is now Lake Martin. Mighty funny, all these black towns are being turned into lakes. Don't you find that interesting? Wonder why that is. Lake Martin also covers Susquehanna, Alabama, which once had a gold mine, a school, 2 mercantiles, a grist mill for grains, a flour mill, a sawmill, a church, and a blacksmith shop. Now under Lake Martin. Seneca Village, New York. We talked about that one last week. Now Central Park. These are all black communities now. However, many have managed to survive, and according to the Oklahoma Historical Society, Nowhere else, neither in the Deep South nor in the Far West, did so many African American men and women come together. Now, this is under the concept of what Chris Cheney on here has been talking about in the comments, which is the nationalism, so to speak. And this was a coming together of black folks. They came together to create, occupy, and govern their own communities. So see, if you got white folks that's going around, we don't want y'all around us. Okay, fine. We're going to go over here. But leave us alone. But we know that didn't happen because we all remember Tulsa, which is finally getting the recognition and attention that it deserves. And hopefully the reparations that it also deserves. From 1865 to 1920, African Americans created more than 50 identifiable towns and settlements, with 13 still in existence in Oklahoma. You know, it's funny, you know, coming from Chicago, we always be making jokes, you know, like places like Oklahoma, Montana, that kind of thing, and we think that black people don't exist there. Well, in fact, Oklahoma has a very strong black population despite the massacre in Tulsa in 1921. All black towns grew in Indian territory after the Civil War, and when the former slaves of the 5 tribes settled together for mutual protection and economic security, when the United States government forced American Indians to accept individual land allotments, most Indian freedmen chose land next to other African Americans. Okay? They created cohesive, prosperous farming communities that could support businesses, schools, and churches, eventually forming towns. And the source for that is oklahomahistory.org. One particular town that is still in existence, Boley, Oklahoma, is the largest and most well-known of all black towns in Oklahoma. The town was named after J.B. Boley, a railroad official of the Fort Smith and Western Railway, founded in 1903 and incorporated in 1905. Boley and the African Americans living in the area prospered for many years. By 1911, Boley boasted more than 4,000 citizens and many businesses. They had 2 banks, 3 cotton gins, and Booker T. Washington, the founder of the National Negro Business League, and the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, visited the town in 1905 and proclaimed it the most enterprising and in many ways the most interesting of Negro towns in the United States. Now, there are still, even not necessarily towns, but there are still communities throughout the United States where black folks have been for a very, very long time. In fact, I lived in Memphis many years ago, and there's a community there called Orange Mound. And Orange Mound is a historically black town. And in fact, I want to say, I don't want to call it a town, but it is a community. I don't know if it was, I don't know enough about the history of it, but I do know that it is one of the oldest in America. Which I've always found to be very interesting. Still black folks over there today. So the town Boley, it supported 2 colleges, Creek Seminole College and Methodist Episcopal College. Boley also had its own electrical generating plant, water system, ice plant, Masonic Grand Lodge, completed a majestic Masonic temple around 1912. At the time, it was said to be the tallest building between Ocmulgee and Oklahoma City. So see, they was doing the thing over there. Thankfully, it wasn't destroyed like so many others. Like many rural towns, Boley suffered through the hard times in the 1920s and 1930s. At the dawn of the 21st century, with a population of 1,126 people, the town was experiencing economic rejuvenation. The number of residents was 1,184 in 2010. Boley still hosts the nation's oldest African-American community-based rodeo every Memorial Day weekend. I think I want to go see that. I think I do. My man, Brian Carradine, is in the building. Enrique Shepard is in the building. Man, look, I see y'all. I appreciate you. Lloyd Nelson, hanging out with your boy. That's a good thing. Okay. Langston, Oklahoma, was home to more than 20 black settlements. Perhaps the most famous of the Greenwood District, Tulsa, Oklahoma, an affluent black community known as Black Wall Street. That was destroyed in 1921. I'm not going to go through all of these. Eatonville, Florida, is yet another one. Incorporated in 1887 and named after the white landowner Josiah C. Eaton, who was one of the few whites willing to sell enough land so that self-governing black town could be created, located just an hour outside of Orlando. Now, the interesting thing about that is last week we did a story, or a week before last, I believe, and we talked about Ocoee, Florida, which was about an hour north. I believe it was. Might have been south, north or south of Orlando, where that massacre, politically motivated massacre, took place, and many people died, and they were all run out, and their land was stolen. See, here again, the stripping away of generational wealth. That man owned orchards. He was one of the pioneers of the black community in Ocoee. His name was Julius July Perry. Murdered. Politics. For trying to register people to vote, for supporting the people who wanted to vote. This place, Eatonville, Florida, is best known for being the birthplace of the author Zora Neale Hurston, and is featured in many of her works, including Their Eyes Were Watching God. If you don't know who Zora Neale Hurston is, you need to do your homework. Great, great, great writer. While readers of Hurston might remember similar towns being referenced in her books, many of them did not survive the expansion of the greater Orlando area prior to integration. The local club Eaton became the popular stop on the Chitlin Circuit. Now, have y'all seen the show? God, what's the name of it? It's slipping my mind right now. I know one of y'all gonna help me. That was just out with where they were showing people traveling in the South, and they had to use the Green Book and different maps in order to find the black folks while traveling through these areas. That was one of those things that was reserved only for black people, because you couldn't go to certain places, and they had these things called sundown towns. And if it got too dark, you better not get caught there if you black. Okay. The Chitlin Circuit, which was a collection of venues throughout the country that welcomed black entertainers. The nightclub was responsible for boosting the careers of musical icons like B.B. King, James Brown, Aretha Franklin, and Tina Turner. The plaque outside of the original building recognizes this history, and the club has since been renamed the Historic Club KOHA, which stands for Keeping Our History Alive. Very interesting. So look, y'all. There's still, as of the 2000 census, there's still 2,500 residents of Eatonville. 90% of them are black. Generational wealth has been greatly hindered by racism and oppression. While there is no magic bullet for racism, access to wealth and the security to pass it down from one generation to the next would go a long way toward changing the economics for blacks. Now, I want y'all to think about this. What would America look like if black people were afforded the same concessions in regard to the purchase of property, where, let's say, our color didn't matter, and let's say that we were able to obtain the credit, we were able to obtain the things necessary to live the same lifestyles. Imagine had Julius Perry, the residents of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and all of the other massacres, Oscarville, Georgia, had they not taken place, and because the Oscarville, Georgia in particular, Forsyth County, one of the richest communities in America today. A lot of that land which was stolen from the people, they ran out of there and did not allow black people back into that place until the 1980s. Can you imagine if they had still owned that land, had not been killed, had not been run off? And this story is national. It's happened so much and so many times. Imagine if they had been able to maintain their properties outside of the hatred. There's generational wealth that has been lost. There's property that has been lost. Property and real estate is one of the most important things in America that you can own. Somebody told me one day, you don't get rid of no property because they ain't making no more. So if you get your hands on some, you hold on to it. Or whatever it's going to do to make or put that nest egg into your family situation that's going to benefit the future. It's something that we have to give a lot of thought to. Enrique Shepard said, not lost, taken. Absolutely. And when I say lost, trust me, I don't mean they just, they misplaced it. I don't mean they walked away from it. I mean, yeah, lost. They lost it because it was stolen. And that was in the opening of this show. That very point is exactly what I meant. Fact is, like any stolen car, it should go back to who it belongs to once it's recovered and once we know the story. But we know that to maintain that wealth and to maintain the status quo, that ain't going to happen. Black History Month has become a time of reflection of the supposed progress of blacks in America. But the reality is that when it comes to wealth, the paramount indicator of economic security, there has been virtually no progress in the last 50 years. The fact is we still only maintain 0.1% of the wealth in America and what is rightfully ours. None of this is by accident. It's all by design. Now, in 1969, when the FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, was asked, in his opinion, what was the single greatest threat to the United States of America? And you know what his response was? Negro unity. In the mind of J. Edgar Hoover, one of the most manipulative, destructive, evil people to be in power in America, in his words, one of the most dangerous things, the single greatest threat to America, Negro unity. So do you still think that this is by happenstance? This is by design. In the spring of 2011, I'm gonna end it with this story right here. While we're talking about generational wealth and the potential to pass it along, this story right here blew me away when I read it. In the spring of 2011, there's two brothers, Melvin Davis and LaCurtis Reels. They lived in a place called Carteret County on the central coast of North Carolina. Now, some people said the brothers were righteous. Others thought they had lost their minds. That March, Melvin and LaCurtis stood in court and refused to leave the land that they had lived on all of their lives, a portion of which had, without their knowledge or consent, been sold to developers years earlier. The brothers were among dozens of Reel's family members who considered the land theirs, but Melvin and LaCurtis had a particular stake in it. Melvin, who was 64, with loose black curls combed into a ponytail, ran a club there and lived in an apartment above it. He'd established a career shrimping in the river that bordered the land, and his sense of self was tied to the water. LaCurtis, who was 53, had spent years building a house near the river's edge, just steps from his mother's. Now, obviously, this is family land, right? This is where they built their lives, and needless to say, it was close to a waterway where he was able to shrimp, and that speaks volumes about the value of that land. Their great-grandfather had bought the land 100 years earlier, when he was a generation removed from slavery. The property, 65 marshy acres that ran along Silver Dollar Road from the woods to the river's shady shore, was racked by storms. Some called it the bottom or the end of the world. Melvin and LaCurtis' grandfather, Mitchell Reels, was a deacon. He farmed watermelons, beets, peas, and raised chickens and hogs. Damn, we need to do that now. Churches held tent revivals on the waterfront, and kids played in the river. A prime spot for catching red-tailed shrimp and crabs bigger than shoes. That's some big old crabs. During the later years of racial segregation laws, the land was home to the only beach in the county that welcomed black families. Now, there are multiple stories of very similar situations. There are property all along that East Coast that was all black owned for decades, much of which has been swallowed up. There are places down in Florida, and there's even places in Texas down there on the around I can't think of the name of it. Doggone it. Some of my Texas family helped me out. What's that area down there? We call it the left coast. Anyway, it's our own little black country club, Melvin and LaCurtis' sister Mamie liked to say. In 1970, when Mitchell died, he had one final wish. Whatever you do, he told his family on the night that he passed away, don't let white men have my land. Do not let them get their hands on this land. Mitchell didn't trust the courts, so he didn't leave a will. Instead, he let the land become heirs' property, a form of ownership in which descendants inherit an interest, like holding stock in a company. The practice began during Reconstruction, when many African Americans didn't have access to the legal system, and it continued through the Jim Crow era, when black communities were suspicious of white Southern courts. In the United States today, 76% of African Americans do not have a will, more than twice the percentage of white Americans. See, this is where we start getting into hairy situations. And this is why, again, when we start talking about the politics of this, again, we have to be concerned about our lack of participation in a system that we could actually mold in our favor if we participated in it. You can't change things unless you're on the inside to do it. You can only, they've always used infiltration. J. Edgar Hoover, for example, we just talked about him, used infiltration to bring down the Black Panther Party, to bring down Martin Luther King, to bring down countless others. You cannot change the system unless you get inside. Many assume that not having a will keeps land in the family. In reality, it jeopardizes ownership. David Dietrich, a former co-chair to the American Bar Association Property Preservation Task Force, has called heirs property the worst problem you ever heard of. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has recognized it as the leading cause of black involuntary land loss. Y'all hear that? Now, a will is one thing, and I'm telling y'all this from my own experience. A will is cool, but if you know where you want your property and your assets and your generational wealth to go, make sure that you not only have a will, but you also have a trust. Put it in trust. That way, there's nothing to talk about. It knows where it goes. There's no probate. Ain't no bunch of jumping through hoops. It's done. Heirs property is estimated to make up more than a third of Southern black-owned land. Right quick, y'all, before I continue. Oh So Smooth family, I appreciate your attendance. You can finish following up with us on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. Y'all have yourselves a wonderful evening. All right, Black Factor family, we're going to keep it going. We have 1 hour exactly, and sometimes the show runs over, so I have to allow the next group to come in on that station. I hate it when I do this too, because I just feel like people are missing stuff. I don't like when people miss stuff. Anyway, heirs property is estimated to make up more than a third of Southern black-owned land, 3.5 million acres, worth more than $28 billion. Billion with a B. All right. These landowners are vulnerable to laws and loopholes that allow speculators and developers to acquire their property. Black families watch as their land is auctioned on courthouse steps and forced into sale against their will. See, we got to do our due diligence, y'all. Between 1910 and 1997, African Americans lost about 90% of their farmland. This problem is a major contributor to America's racial wealth gap. See, goes back to what I said earlier, and Enrique said, stolen by law. See, and if you don't put yourself in the game to help change the law, then you're going to always lose. We got to be involved in the process. This problem, again, is a major contributor to America's racial wealth gap. The median wealth among black families is about a tenth that of white families. Now, as reparations have become a subject of national debate, the issue of black land loss is receiving renewed attention. A group of economists and statisticians recently calculated that since 1910, black families have been stripped of hundreds of billions, hundreds of, not millions, billions of dollars because of lost land. Nathan Rosenberg, a lawyer for a researcher in the group, told me, if you want to understand wealth and inequality in this country, you have to understand black land loss. Black land loss, y'all. This is what we're talking about. By the time of Melvin and LaCurtis' hearing in 2011, now this is where it gets hairy, y'all. They had spent decades fighting to keep the waterfront on Silver Dollar Road. They'd been warned that they would go to jail if they didn't comply with a court order to stay off the land, and they felt betrayed by the laws that had allowed it to be taken from them in the first place. They had been baptized in that water. You gonna go there? Take my dreams from me like that, Curtis asked on the stand. How about it was you? They expected to argue their case in court that day. Instead, the judge ordered them sent to jail. Did they commit a crime? See, now we go back again to the first portion of this show where we talked about how the prison industrial complex has a way of stripping people from their property, their family, economics, politics. The list goes on. They expected to argue their case, and the judge ordered them sent to jail. Guess why? Civil contempt. They got sent to jail for contempt of court. But this gets worse. Hearing the ruling, Melvin handed his 83-year-old mother, Gertrude, his flip phone and his gold watch. As the eldest son, he had promised relatives that he would assume responsibility for the family. I can take it, he said. LaCurtis looked at the floor and shook his head. He had thought he'd be home by the afternoon. He'd even left his house unlocked. The bailiff, who had never booked anyone in civil superior court, had only one set of handcuffs. She put a cuff on each brother's wrist and led them out the back door. The brothers hadn't been charged with a crime, no charges, or given a jury trial. Still, they believed so strongly in their right to the property that they spent the next 8 years fighting their case from a jail cell. 8 years for contempt of court, civil contempt of court. You see how they do black people? The justice system? No, the legal system that is manipulated in a way that works in favor of those who would oppress you. They were two of the longest serving inmates for civil contempt in U.S. history. Come on now. See, so I'm going to wrap this up. And I said all of this to say we must begin to focus more clearly on generational wealth, the wealth gap, why it exists, how to individually, because collectively I'm not going to be, I'll be very optimistic if I said that collectively we would do something about it. But collectively, we still can vote. We still can work toward unification enough to build our communities and things. But there's so many layers to that. There's so much stuff we have to do first. And I'm always afraid. I hate to be a pessimist, but I'm always afraid that we're just not going to work that hard. But the fact is, as individuals, because we don't, people talk about black leaders, and I kind of have a problem with that concept. Why do we need leaders? I don't see no white leaders. Why do black people need leaders? If we do everything that we're supposed to do individually, we can make it better for everyone just by being the best that we can be. As we build for ourselves and our families to be able to provide that hand down, those generational wealth, the ability to leave something for our children, leave something for those of us that will be here and remain and carry on. I am always skeptical of the ability for most people to be able to leave anything these days. We don't have the retirement systems that were once in place. Jobs are no longer this thing that you stay at for 20 and 30 years. You just don't see that kind of stuff anymore. So there are a lot of other factors at play. And it's just like I said at the beginning of the show, I'm always, there's so many things that will make what we need possible that there's really no way to wrap all of that up into some sort of a neat little bundle and put a bow on it and say, this is what we need to do. That's just not possible. If a book had to be written about what was necessary, and include why it's necessary, that book would probably be this tall off my desk. I mean, it would be ridiculous. So individually, we can effectively change things. We can purchase properties if it's for nothing more than economic reasons, for income reasons, or whatever the case may be. We can purchase land. There is still land available. There are things that we can do. There are ways that we can build wealth, build our communities, and benefit ourselves, our families, and everyone around us. And I know that just sounds so damn idealistic, but some days I feel idealistic, and I'm feeling idealistic today, and I know we can do it, but we just have to put our minds to it and go ahead and make that happen. My man Marshawn Calhoun, man, it's good to see you, brother. I'm glad you tuned in. He said they just tried to take his shop. Wow, but you know me personally. Yes, I do, my man, and I know how now I'm gonna tell y'all. This guy right here that's on my live feed, Mr. Calhoun, this is one of my people from Memphis, as a matter of fact, when I lived there. And he, in fact, lives right outside. His shop is in the Orange Mound community that I was just talking about, one of the oldest black communities in America. And, in fact, I've seen him fight some battles with some people. But one thing about Marshawn that I admired is that he's always... You're not going to push him around. He got a little change to throw around if he needs to, but he's also one of those people who has done exactly what we're talking about on this show. He has built something up. He has property. He has been doing this ever since I've known him. And we've gotten older, but we talking, 20 some years, 30 years. But that's what it's about. And the fact is, if they want to, you ain't gonna just push this dude around. It's gonna be a fight. So, Marshawn, good luck to you. I know you, and I know it ain't gonna be that. Whatever happened, it ain't gonna. Somebody gonna get scarred up. Let me put it like that. they gonna get scarred up. They gonna get scarred up in court real bad, one way or the other. They gonna know they've been in a fight. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you all for tuning in. I'm happy to be able to convey the information that I can, and to at least give you food for thought and put your mind in a place where you can consider the future. And if we don't know where we've been, of course, we don't know where we are, and we definitely don't know where we're going. And this has been the Black Factor, where the truth has no bearing on your feelings. So I want you all to have yourselves one fantastic, super elastic, bubble plastic evening. Y'all know I like to be silly. I want everybody to have a wonderful night and enjoy your loved ones and just think about the future. Think about what's coming and what you need to do to make things work for you, your family, your community, and your future. I love y'all, man. Thank you. Y'all have a fantastic night. And I wouldn't be right if I didn't say love, peace, and chicken grease, y'all. I got to do that because my people get mad at me if I don't.